asked myself, why was I, the chief of special ops, selected to travel to the South Pole at that time to do a job that any number of others could have done? And I wondered if it could have been because one of my routine duties, if I had been in Washington, would have been to arrange for additional security in Texas. So I decided to check it out. And sure enough, I found out that someone had told the 112th Military Intelligence Group at 4th Army Headquarters at Fort Sam Houston to stand down that day over the protests of the unit commander, Colonel Reich.
I believe it's a mistake.
This is significant because it is standard operating procedure, especially in a known hostile city like Dallas, to supplement the Secret Service. I mean, even if we had not allowed the bubble top to be removed from the limousine, we would have placed at least 100 to 200 agents on the sidewalk without question. I mean, only a month ago in Dallas, UN Ambassador Adlai Stevenson was spit on and hit. There had already been several attempts on de Gaulle's life in France. We would have arrived days ahead of time, studied the route, checked all the buildings, never would have allowed all those wide-open empty windows overlooking Dealey, never. We'd have had our own snipers covering the area. The minute a window went up, they'd have been on the radio. We'd have been watching the crowd, packages, rolled up newspapers, coat over and out. Never would have let a man open an umbrella along the way. Never would have allowed that limousine to slow down to 10 miles an hour, much less take that unusual curve at Houston and Elm. You would have felt an Army presence in the streets that day. None of this happened. It was a violation of the most basic protection codes we have, and it is the best indication of a massive plot in Dallas. Now, who could have best done this? Black Ops, Mr. Garrison. People in my business, people like my superior officer could have called Colonel Reich and said, look, we have another unit coming from so-and-so providing security. You'll stand down. I mean, that day, in fact, there were some individual Army intelligence people in Dallas. I'm still trying to figure out who and why. But they weren't protecting the client. And, of course, Oswald. Army Intel had a Harvey Lee Oswald on file. But all those files have been destroyed. Many strange things were happening, and your Lee Harvey Oswald had nothing to do with them. Well, that's a real question, isn't it? Why? The how and the who is just scenery for the public. Oswald, Ruby, Cuba, the Mafia. Keeps them guessing like some kind of parlor game, prevents them from asking the most important question, why? Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? Who has the power to cover it up? Who?
Welcome, this is Red Eyes Creations Radio. My name is Henrik Palmgren. Thank you for tuning in. Good to have you with us. We are coming to you from the west coast of Sweden, up in Scandinavia. You can find us 24/7 from around the world where internet is accessible through our website, redicecreations.com. That's REDICE creations.com. Glad to have you here. As you might have noticed, our last few programs have been a mini-series of sorts with speakers that are going to attend the Beyond Knowledge Conference in Liverpool at the beginning of May. And today we are continuing with that tradition with author and conspiracy researcher Kenn Thomas. He's the editor and publisher of Steam Shovel Press. He's written NASA, Nazis and JFK, and Mind Control. Also Oswald and JFK, and also together with Jim Keith, The Octopus, Secret Government, and the Death of Danny Casalero. Last year he was a speaker at the Conspiracy Con, and today we're going to discuss everything from the Octopus to Wilhelm Reich to UFOs, and if there's time we might also get into some interesting stuff about the Maury Island case, a UFO case. So there's lots to talk about, and we're short of time, so I want to get things going here as soon as possible. I do want to mention, though, before that, Kenn's website is steamshovelpress.com. steamshovelpress.com, where you can find a lot more information on his magazine, books, DVDs, and lots of articles. So with that, let's say welcome to our guest. Thank you for coming on, Kenn. Nice to have you with us.
Henrik, hi. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's nice to be here.
Superb. If you will, for our listeners that are new to yourself or your material and research, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in regards to conspiracy research, and also about the Steam Shovel magazine.
Okay. Well, I've been doing Steam Shovel. The magazine is actually called Steam Shovel Press, and I've been doing it as a magazine since like 1992. And I've been kind of a presence on the global conspiracy culture world for all that time and for times preceding that. The magazine kind of began as a book review newsletter, and at a certain point in time, major things were happening in the conspiracy counterculture in America. The great maven of conspiracy theorists, a woman named Mae Brussels, died, and one of the great magazines of the time called Critique, the founder of that magazine found a guru somewhere and converted his magazine all into the homilies of his guru. And all of this information, this underground information about conspiracies and so forth, was a real threat that it was just going to stop happening. So I turned my little book review newsletter into a magazine. I did a call for papers telling everybody, hey, I'm here. Let's keep this going. I'll produce this magazine. Send me articles. And so, like with its fourth issue, Steam Shovel became a zine, basically, a magazine. People kind of lose track of how information was carried back before the internet. It was,
Right.
in a lot of ways, it was just distributed through these little things that were kind of offshoots of different kinds of fanzines, which were fan magazines.
Right.
There were zines, and there were a number of them. My writing partner, Jim Keith, did one called Dharma Combat.
Right.
Greg Bishop did The Excluded Middle. A guy named Jim Martin did Flatland, and I did Steam Shovel Press. They all kind of got almost nonsensical names. But the theme there,
Right.
the theme for all of it was to carry on the work that had been done in different communities, a lot of it the JFK assassination community that had been going on for 30 years at that point.
Right.
And to present information from different points of view that contradicted the official record and promoted the idea that there are secret agendas and hidden histories and different kinds of information that is suppressed in the mainstream culture.
Nice, nice. Have you moved online basically now, or still giving out the magazine as a zine?
The last issue of the magazine was a little bit of both. It's still available in hard copy form, but I'm also circulating it as a PDF.
Right.
But for many years now, there has been SteamShovelPress.com, which was kind of ancillary to the magazine. A lot of editorial work and articles and stuff go on up there, basically for free. It's not a paid-for site, but everything that's going on in between issues that we want to get out there, and that's been going on for a number of years. But it still exists as a magazine, and you can still subscribe to it and get it in the mail in hard copy form.
Do you send worldwide or only within the U.S.?
Worldwide, as long as people are willing to pay for the overseas
shipping,
postal rates.
Right.
Yeah, so I do have readers all over the world. Not as many as in the U.S., but it certainly gets out there.
Excellent. I would like to talk a little bit about some of the material in the Octopus, and as you mentioned, this is something that you wrote together with Jim Keith, and we had Jerry Smith with us on the program about a week ago now, and talked actually a little bit about Jim Keith. They were good friends, and were you as close as Jim and Jerry too?
Well, I think actually Jerry went to high school with Jim Keith.
Right.
Yeah, he was like a childhood friend. So I didn't know Keith that long. Keith and I actually met in that realm I was just talking about, in the zine world. As different people. I was publishing this magazine, and Keith was always looking for a different outlet for his writing. So that's how we knew each other. But so obviously I'm not as close to him as Jerry was if he went to high school with him.
Right.
But we did co-write this thing, and in the middle of all that, or after it was all over, he died under very strange circumstances.
Yeah.
And
so
an interesting adventure in my career, I think.
Yeah. So what were some of the main things that you guys focused on in the Octopus? I know that the Inslaw scandal and of course the subsequent murder, then I guess of Danny Casolaro was a big theme of the book, right?
That's right. What actually had happened was Casolaro was working on a book himself that he called, he originally called it Behold the Pale Horse, which is actually a title that was later made famous by a guy named Bill Cooper.
William Cooper, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, the original title of Casolaro's book was Behold the Pale Horse, too, but he changed it to The Octopus.
Huh.
And he was accumulating all this information from various spy sources and mafia sources and underground figures involving the Inslaw case, the Promise software, and a whole bunch of other things. And his idea, I think the way he thought that he was going to get around, the consequences of doing that kind of work was to fictionalize it. He was writing a fictional novel, what he was presenting as a fictional novel, after going out and doing all of this really hardball research into the spy world. And he figured if he presented it as fiction, then, nobody would mind. But, of course, the people that he was talking to didn't look at it that way. And he stepped on somebody's toes or, pushed the envelope a little too far in one direction, and he was found dead in a hotel room in West Virginia with slashes in his wrists, with the official conclusion that it was a suicide. But before that happened, he had contacted his family members and his friends, and he said, look, they're on to me. If an accident befalls me or if something happens to me, don't believe it was an accident. Don't believe it was suicide. They're out to get me. He told everybody that. And then what happened after he died, the majority of his research was deposited at the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. And I just so happened to work in my daytime position as an archivist at the university, for actually that university at its St. Louis branch. So here we had all of this fantastic behind-the-scenes research kind of dumped in our laps, And so I brought it to Keith. I was talking to Keith on a regular basis then. I said, well, what can we do with this? And Jim said, well, Jim's first idea was really basically let's finish the book that he was going to write. Let's prove to them that they can't stop somebody from exposing all of this stuff. And what we wound up doing was not exactly that. Although in the Octopus, we do reproduce Castellero's early drafts and his proposals and as much of the writing that was preserved in those notes. But we kind of add to that Castellero's biography and then a whole bunch of research on our own that shows all the various tributaries of the scandals that he was investigating.
Right. That's weird, though, in a way, isn't it? That, a guy who's writing a fictional work at that time, when there were so many other people around writing, non-fictional work on many of the same subjects, right?
Well, actually, there wasn't really a lot of work on Inslaw or Promise. It began for Castellero in one of his other day jobs. He used to write for computer trade magazines, and that's where the whole Promise software started up. Even to this day, Inslaw is kind of an obscure scandal of that time. People kind of look back and they think of Iran-Contra, maybe.
Right.
In that kind of thing. But Iran-Contra was actually more of an extension of the kind of dynamic that Castellero had exposed with the Inslaw case. That is the sleeping with the enemy kind of thing, where America was actually cooperating with basically what we could conceive of as jihadist terrorists.
Right.
At the time. Yeah. So.
So that's the background on the Inslaw case. That is a clear connection with the Iran-Contra affair. Is that it?
Yeah. Well, you see, it actually really begins in 1980 when Castellero basically reached the same conclusion that another guy, I think his name was Gary Sick, S-I-C-K, who wrote a book called The October Surprise.
Right.
And The October Surprise is the story of the Reagan campaign team having contacts with the Ayatollah Khomeini to hold on to the famous hostages, the 52 hostages of that time, until after Jimmy Carter lost the election. That's called the October Surprise.
Right.
And where it begins for Danny Castellero after that is the man who made the payoff, the man who took the money for that little illegal conspiracy to subvert an American election and gave it to Khomeini, made the payoff to Khomeini for doing that, was a guy named Earl Bryan. And his reward for paying off Khomeini was to be given something called the Promise software. And that's why everybody kind of focuses on this case, because the Promise software involves a super sophisticated surveillance software that kind of drives the Echelon satellite systems that spy on us